Hello, and welcome to tonight's special event as part of NAEYC's Annual Conference. We are so glad you are here. I am Michelle Kang, NAEYC's Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer, and I am thrilled about what is ahead in the next hour as we celebrate Ella Jenkins, the First Lady of Children's Music. On behalf of NAEYC, I want to thank HighScope for being a NAEYC year-round platinum sponsor and for hosting this evening's event. NAEYC is incredibly grateful for our partnership with HighScope and for enabling us to have content like this session brought to our conference attendees. We hope you will stay with us for the entire presentation, but if the internet goes out, don't worry. You can access this recording on demand for the next 30 days through the NAEYC Annual Conference website. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the President of HighScope, Alejandra Barraza.
Thank you, Michelle. It has truly been a difficult year, yet I am confident that if we all work together and support each other, we can do amazing things for children and their families. Even in these uncertain times, HighScope stands with you. We are your partners in the important work of early childhood education. The HighScope Educational Research Foundation is honored to sponsor the Ella Jenkins event. It is my pleasure to introduce our special guests. Gail Wald is Professor of American Studies at George Washington University. Her academic interests center on 20th century African American culture, and she teaches courses on US cultural history, Black literature, and US popular music. She is the author of 3 books, including Shout, Sister, Shout, The Untold Story of Rock and Roll Trailblazer, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and It's Been Beautiful, Soul and Black Power Television. She is a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Humanities. She is currently working on a book tentatively titled Democratic Rhythms, Ella Jenkins, Children's Music and Civil Rights in America. Tim Farron is an independent filmmaker in Chicago, specializing in documentaries, educational and arts programming, and nonprofit video. Selected by the Smithsonian Institute and the National Endowment for the Arts History Film Forum as the Emerging Filmmaker in 2017, he has produced programs for National Geographic Channel, PBS, and the cable television. He has also created programming for a diverse list of organizations, including the Lincoln Center, the National Endowment of the Arts, the Sustainability Consortium, Northwestern University, and Major League Baseball. He has been working closely with Ella Jenkins for the last several years on a documentary about the life and work of the First Lady of Children's Music, Ella Jenkins. We'll sing a song together. We hope you enjoy the event.
Hello, I'm Tim Farron, and I'm so happy to be here with everybody attending the NAEYC annual virtual conference this year. As Alejandra said, thank you, Alejandra, for that wonderful introduction. I've been working closely with Ella Jenkins and her management over the last several years on the first ever documentary about Miss Jenkins and her life and work. And fortunately with me is my friend and colleague, Gail Wald. Gail.
Hi, good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are local time. It's nice to see all those shout outs in the chat. I'm Gail Wald. I'm a professor at George Washington University, and I have been really happy to have known Tim for a few years and also be working on a project about Ella Jenkins.
So, as I said, we're glad to be here with the NAEYC group. This is absolutely Ella's crowd. She attended NAEYC conferences for decades, up until fairly recently, but she was really glad to hear that we're going to have everybody join us today. So the way this will work, the documentary is a work in progress. We're in post-production on it, and we have some work samples, clips that we're going to share and show for everyone, and then Gail and I will discuss different elements from the clips in between the clips. So to kick it off, I don't know how many folks have seen Ella, know her music. Some of you, I assume, her music and her name might be new to you. So here's a little introductory clip. It's not necessarily part of the film. It's something we put together. And it's sharing one of her best known songs that she wrote called You'll Sing a Song and I'll Sing a Song. And Katie, let's see the clip.
You always liked to sing and play, even when you were a little girl?
Well, you know, I'm not a formal musician, but I always liked music. I used to hear it around my neighborhood, and sometimes from the churches, sometimes just from a music store. And I used to go to children's camps and used to hear music, and so it's I like to sing, as I said before, with people and with the children. Okay?
It really is a part of you, isn't it?
Let me start out and let me just sing the introduction of You'll Sing a Song and I'll Sing a Song. Next time around, I'd like for you to sing it with me. You'll sing a song, I'll sing a song, and we'll sing a song together.
Then we'll sing a song together.
You'll sing a song, and I'll sing a song.
In warm or wintry, you'll play a tune. You. Louder.
You play a tune, and I'll play a tune. In warm or wintry. Listen to the sound.
Rum bum ba-dum, ba-dum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum. You hum a line, and I'll hum a line, and we'll hum a line together. You'll hum a line, and I'll hum a line, in warm and wintry weather.
Let's sing You'll Whistle a While.
You'll whistle a while and I'll whistle a while. Then we'll whistle a while together. You'll whistle a while and I'll whistle a while. And one more. Try if you can.
Oh, that was hard. Well, you sing a song and I'll sing a song.
We'll sing a song together. You'll sing a song and I'll sing a song.
Warm or wintry weather. Let's try that all together.
So thank you for doing, I mean, it's an amazing montage of performances of the song. A little background about the song, that the song comes from Ella Jenkins' 1966 album of the same name that would go on to become the best-selling album for a very long time, maybe still today, but for a very long time at Folkways Records, her record label, now Folkways Smithsonian. That song is also important because in 2007, that song was entered into the Library of Congress's National Recording Registry, which is basically a registry of significant sound recordings. And so one of the reasons that I think, Tim, you queued that up is because it's so exemplary of Ella's work, and also has been recognized as an important piece of kind of the American sonic heritage.
Absolutely. And I think, Gail, correct me if I'm wrong, is it the first children's, quote unquote, children's song to be added to the National Recording Registry?
Oh, I'm not sure about that, but we can find out.
If not, it's one of the first. But it's a familiar song for many people, for educators. They've used it. As you said, it came out in 1966. And in those series of clips, Ella's been kind enough to share her archive with me. And I'm kind of the first person to lay eyes on a lot of this stuff. And it's a familiar song, so I thought it was fun to take so many examples. Her with Fred Rogers. There's a clip of her in Beijing in 1988 teaching a group of children the song. There's a panel I found from 1973, or giving a workshop to a group of teachers. So I thought that kind of shows not just the musicality, but kind of the breadth of what it is that she does. And then there's some more recent clips in there too. Of Ella performing the song. So, and some folks may have been at some of these conferences. There are a couple NAEYC conferences, footage from a couple of conferences in there. So I thought that was kind of fun for everybody to see.
In terms of what that clip also shows, Ella's signature methodology, which she announced in the title of her first ever album for Folkways in 1957, was what she called call and response rhythmic group singing. It's a kind of scientific sounding name for follow the leader. And I think and you kind of see that being played out in this song. The song is about singing together, which is an important statement of, I think, Ella Jenkins' values about music as a source of social bonds, and also a place where we encounter each other in our difference, but also as a collective. But also her method of teaching children in a way that took away some of the anxiety around mastery that was characteristic of methods that were dominant in the 1950s of teaching children, and introducing musicality through you do what I do. And then once you can do what I do, you can be the leader of the next song. So a way of kind of making the relationship between teacher and student more horizontal, ultimately.
And giving students and teachers, whomever she is teaching the song, giving them the ability to take it with them and bring it to the next group, the next crowd, the next gathering of friends, which is so fundamental.
You talked about, kind of being in Ella Jenkins' archive, or having access. One of the things that she did that maybe it's important to set out is talk about her self-documentation.
Ella was a very avid self-documenter, and if any of you have gone through her liner notes for her 40 plus albums on Folkways and now Smithsonian Folkways, she documents in many cases where she found songs, how she found them, how she's changed them, how she's adapted them through practice. She's very transparent about it, but there's a real wealth of material from album to album to album. And often each album has its own underlying concept. I would say every record of hers really is a concept album, even dating back to her first 10-inch record, Call and Response, in 1957. I know, Gail, maybe you and I are two of the few people who have actually read through all of Ella's
well, and I think
notes.
The liner notes are a significant, not everyone will engage with the liner notes. And some of them, for those of you out there who don't necessarily own the physical copies of the work, you can go to the Smithsonian Folkways website, and the liner notes are downloadable for free as PDFs, which is an amazing resource. But the liner notes themselves constitute a significant artistic self-documentation over many, many years of her work. And they're really a rich source of talking about kind of her values and her theory of working.
And I think not only, it's exemplified in the liner notes, but Ella also privately, it's just written all the time. Poetry or letters or writing is just part of her practice. And she's someone who, as we can see as we look at some more clips and listen to some more songs. She's somebody who loves playing with language. She still loves playing with language and what that means and how it's expressed. And she understands the utility of language, which is so important when you're working particularly with young children. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to unpack in what she writes and what she shares.
Mm-hmm. Should we cue up?
Let's do the next clip.
Do you want to talk about what we're going to see in the show?
Sure. This is a clip that there are a few different voices, some different folks you may recognize in here, but a lot of the material was shot when we visited the NAEYC conference. Our crew went. It was one of our first road trips, and we went with Ella to Dallas. This was in 2014, and encountered a lot of people who knew her work and loved her. And so this is just kind of a further, more in-depth look at Ella in the field in recent years.
Good to see you. Oh, you sweet.
Oh my goodness. Y'all don't understand. I am, but it was just an honor just to see her.
I mean, how do you describe Ella? There's one Ella Jenkins.
Come over here, guys. You know who this is.
She's the only person I ever stood in line to meet and get an autograph from in my life. No offense.
Let's take a selfie.
That's what you call selfie?
That's a selfie, you and me.
Not bad for a 90-year-old. I had my birthday August 6th, 90. If someone wants to learn songs for children, they have to listen to Ella Jenkins. That's it.
We've been listening to your music for like ever and ever and ever. Mr. George.
I've been a professional for 40 years. And I've
been a preschool teacher for 40 years. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's Ella Jenkins. Oh my gosh.
Kids love what she was doing, and she picked up on that, and wow, she took it and ran with it.
I'll sing a song, and you sing a song, and we'll sing a song together.
She's an unrecognized giant in American music.
In 1980, when I started with toddlers, you were my saving grace.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm gonna cry. We need to sing a song.
You're gonna make me cry.
It's not always the people who make the biggest contribution that get the most notoriety.
So there's a little bit of Ella at the NAEYC conference in Dallas, and with some commentary from some friends and colleagues. And some people may recognize Barbara Bowman, who is co-founder of the Erickson Institute, and we'll hear a little bit more from an interview with her later in an exclusive clip that nobody has seen. With some archival footage here of Ella. But I think I always laugh with the teacher who is crouched down next to Ella, and she says, when I started teaching in 1998, you were my saving grace. I think, gosh, 1998 was a while ago, but Ella really started on this path in the late 50s. And at that point, there really weren't people doing what she was doing, not for quite some time. She was really the only one out there creating music specifically written and curated for children and families and for group participation.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I was just looking the other day at some old video of another children's music teacher named Charity Bailey, who worked in New York City and was part of progressive education in New York City. And she briefly had a television show in the 1950s. And what's interesting about both the sound that you had playing in the background, where you hear Ella playing the drums, we can talk about like kind of her multilingualism and her approach to kind of non-English languages in her repertoire. And also in the first clip where you see her playing her signature instrument, which is the baritone ukulele, which maybe for kids just looks like a kind of kid-sized guitar, is that it's so important that when she started recording, music teachers, even Charity Bailey in the 50s, was behind the piano. Ella we'll see this later about not being a trained musician, but I think it was so important that she produced these accessible instruments. She brought rhythm sticks, all kinds of percussion and rhythm instruments into the classroom. And those were accessible instruments. You didn't need to read music. You didn't need to have access to a piano. And I think it demystified musicality for children. It wasn't just the teacher who knew how to play the piano. And I think that was an important part of her method.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting too that Ella really started out the uke. She didn't start playing the uke until the 60s, the baritone uke. Prior to that, really, she played percussion and drums and a lot of instruments, and she really soaked that up, as we'll see in another clip. She really got into Afro-Cuban music and the folk scene that was going on in San Francisco, where she went to school, and in Chicago when she came back to Chicago. And all of those are hand instruments, all those are accessible. When Ella began working with children, she wasn't working with young children primarily. She was working with older children, older teenagers, high schoolers, in that range. And you can hear some of those kids on her early records. But she worked for the YWCA here in Chicago. She was a teenage program director and worked with largely junior high and high school age kids on the south side of Chicago. But things kind of started to blossom. She found herself filling a need and gravitated more towards young children, starting really in the 60s. So You'll Sing a Song and I'll Sing a Song, the album I should mention, was she wrote the song with a group of kids at the Bernard Horwich JCC here in Chicago. And Sue Tweedy, who we saw in one of those clips, she wasn't a student at the time that they wrote the song, but she was a student of Ella's at the Bernard Horwich JCC. And my neighbor, actually a couple of doors down, was a student of Ella's at the Bernard Horwich JCC. But it's just fun to see all these connections that Ella has into the community, with young children that have gone on to make music and educate all their peers and teachers.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, before we get to the next clip, one of the things that I think is interesting is that when Ella was working, Tim, you were talking about how Ella had been working at the YWCA in Chicago, and she had been working with teenagers. And she was, she talks about this in her liner notes, but she was working with African-American girls, mostly at the time, what was the YWCA, with girls. And she was interested in teaching them about Black history. And the way that she did that was by forming a Latin music club. This was a time in the 50s, right, when Calypso music via Harry Belafonte was popular. And so she used the idea of a rhythm club in order to teach girls about kind of African musics in the Americas, in the Caribbean, in North America, in South America. And in some ways, she was doing the work of Black history pedagogy before Black studies existed in universities. That would happen after 1968. But she was doing this work with teenagers in the 50s. In a way, it was very subversive work.
That's very true. And she did also work with boys too. In fact, one of the interviews that I did a couple of years ago before he passed was with Morris Jennings, who was a student of hers at the YWCA. He was in the Latin Club, and he went on to become a professional drummer. He was a house drummer for Chess Records here in Chicago and cut things at Motown as a house drummer, and played with Ramsey Lewis for many years. Had a pretty great musical career. Was just a charming guy. He had been in school bands too, but Ella, he always felt was just such a nurturing presence to him, and she kind of helped get him out there in the world as a percussionist and drummer, starting in the Latin Club at the YWCA, the Ida B. Wells YWCA. So, I was going to say I know maybe some folks watching. We're at the NAEYC conference. There's a story that a lot of the staff and former staff at Smithsonian Folkways likes to tell about a NAEYC conference that was in Washington, D.C. maybe 10, 15 years ago, where Ella was one of the presenters, a keynote presenter. And they were in, I can't remember what hotel they were in, but they were in the ballroom. And so many people came to see her that they barred the doors against fire code. They barred the doors of the ballroom in the hotel because people were pounding on the doors to try to get in to see her. It's just a fun anecdote.
She's a rock star.
She is. I mean, and well deserved.
So what's in the third clip?
So the third clip is here's a little bit more about Ella's background. We can see some of the folks that she influenced. We get to see her brother Tom, whom she grew up with, her only sibling, and they were very close throughout his life. He was very influential and also a music fan. And then we get to see Ella at work on one of her more recent albums, Camp Songs, which came out on Smithsonian Folkways a couple of years ago.
My uncle, who came from Louisiana and moved to Chicago and worked in the steel mill in Gary, Indiana, worked for many, many long hours. After his hard day's work, he came back out of his vest pocket, pull out a harmonica, and he would play for hours. And I would sit right down on the floor by his feet, and I learned all by just listening.
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, but I grew up on the south side of Chicago.
This was in the 30s. We were poor. We lived there with my mother and uncle and an aunt, Uncle Flood, and his wife, my mother's sister, and we called her Big Mama.
Those school people are lucky to have you. Bye-bye.
I love it being over here where this playground is because you can hear the sound of the children's voices. Sometimes early in the morning, you know, when their parents will bring them over here, even before they go to school, they're out. And those are some great sounds. I said, that spells life for me. That's what I really, really enjoy. Callaway really influenced my style of singing. When I was growing up, he was one of the frequent entertainers at the Regal Theater. We called him the Hidey-Ho Man.
Hidey, 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 hide. Hidey, 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 hide.
Whoa! You got the purple light shining on him in his white suit, and he's throwing his hair around and so forth, and his band is really playing, and that was really something.
Hidey, 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 hide.
Whatever he said, we tried to imitate him. And that's how he got the call and response.
I think of Ella Jenkins as the first emotional connection that I had to music. And maybe the first time that music became something that I could be a part of, that I could participate in. La, 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 la. Anytime there was a chance to be a part of the show, I always had my hand raised as high as possible. She's not just up there performing, she's inviting you to be a part of it.
I would chant out something for them to chant back, and then some of them would introduce melodies or lines.
Keep going.
We exchanged with one another and we learned from one another.
Another thing she would do was hand out instruments in the crowd, you know, and they'd play along with us.
Play your instrument and make a pretty sound.
Some people had rhythms of
Play your instruments and make a pretty sound.
You know, say, hey, let me have that instrument. Give it to somebody else.
Let's make a pretty sound.
She's getting it into kids' minds that making music is not just for professionals. Music is ours, it's yours, and we can make it together.
Let's make a pretty sound.
Muchacha means little girl. Muchacho means little boy. Muchacha means little girl. Muchacho means little boy. Now you tell me what muchacha means, little
Boy.
Muchacha means little what?
Boy?
Not boy. What would you tell the opposite? Girl.
Girl.
Okay. Muchacha means little.
Boy.
Muchacha.
In Chicago, we used to go to the West Side because there were more Latinos in action over there as far as music was concerned. Now and then, I would see her in the crowd. What she was doing was just absorbing it because she loved the music so much. And slowly she was picking up different instruments and she was adding them to her repertoire, what she wanted to do.
Ella was doing songs from all over the world and from all these different traditions back in the 1950s. You know, the term multiculturalism didn't exist at the time. She didn't talk about it. It wasn't like, you know, she said, okay, the purpose of what we're doing is to learn about other cultures. She just presented, like, you know, here's a song I want to share with you.
Sorry.
Back where we set up the chairs.
Ella began singing in summer camps before she began making recordings.
If you have your music, put it on the stand because we're going to need it.
I think the children that she sang with had an influence on her. It wasn't just her own background, it's also the people that you're singing with and the songs that they bring to you.
Can everyone do this?
All of you sounded very good.
We're gonna be doing first Kumbaya.
Kumbaya,
my Lord. Kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord.
They have another vision of the world. It's not just the town they live and the state they live. It opens up their minds, their understanding, the desire to learn more.
You trusted Ella and you loved Ella and you wanted to go on the trip with her and see where she was going to take you next.
That's such a rich, another incredibly rich group of clips there, and there's so much to say about it. I mean, one of the things that strikes me is when Ella acknowledges, and this is in that clip, but she also talks about this a lot, you know, the ways that she calls herself untrained, and yet she also has a critique of that idea of untrained. What she means is that, you know, she received her training in places that were not, you know, kind of institutions that were recognized as training institutions. And so putting the footage of Cab Calloway, she's talking about Cab Calloway, you see how she was an acute, you know, listener, not just to Black popular music, and also to folk music. And she found a way of bringing those two things together. Sometimes when people talk about the folk revival, you know, the folk revivalists in the 50s and 60s were sometimes portrayed as, you know, didn't like commercial music because it was commercial. And it's really interesting that those streams come together in her. I don't think she saw, you know, she wasn't a purist. She has not been a purist that way, to see kind of the commercial and the non-commercial as somehow in competition with each other. And it's interesting how it's drawing this line of a kind of Black musical aesthetic of call and response, and then universalizing that. So giving that to everyone. She also talked about how call and response was a part of a Black musical aesthetic, but you could find it in many, many different cultural sites. It wasn't, she wanted not to fetishize that, but you know, really to kind of use it in this incredibly creative way.
Yeah, and I think part of what I love, that I think that Ella, I mean, she'll still talk about going to see Cab Calloway at the Regal Theater, and people always go, really, Cab Calloway, what an interesting influence. But you can see the same kind of enthusiasm that Ella has when she turns around and shares a song with a group of children or with a group of educators. You see that in what Cab Calloway does on stage. You can imagine what an impression that made on her and on her brother when they were sitting in the seats. You know, watching him do it.
Yeah, I love that comment because Calloway, you know, was famously a band leader who didn't play music. He could sing and he could chant, but he didn't ever get like tickle the ivories. And, you know, he was talked about as a kind of charismatic figure. And I feel like we don't have as good a language for charismatic women as we do for charismatic men. We're more familiar with the kind of figure of the charismatic man. And he certainly was one of those. But she also, everyone who talks about it, it's not just that she was somehow a Pied Piper. She developed this charisma. She was able to kind of harness it and use it for her craft.
Right, and the Pied Piper, oh, she really dislikes that Pied Piper analogy. She kind of rankles at it. But a caveat in respect to Cab Calloway, is a huge influence on Cab Calloway was his sister Blanche, who was a recording star in her own right prior to him. And he saw her doing it and it ended up becoming a bigger star. But Ella still remembers Blanche Calloway. Growlin' Dan, I think, was one of her popular tunes, more popular song. So
Blanche Callaway, there's actually music researchers doing work right now. There's someone who's writing a book about Blanche Callaway, kind of another underappreciated, you know, the sister who kind of got shunted to the side when Cab Calloway took over. There's also what you have the man who's the conductor who you know grew up under her tutelage talks about kind of the idea of being invited in. And, you know, that seems, there's a way that, you know, it's not just a kind of, you know, intangible quality of her person, although it's part of that. It also, I think, again, was kind of a project of how do you create a pedagogy that is about inviting people in rather than making them feel intimidated. So that even in that song where she's like kind of doing a little bit of a Spanish lesson, she's not telling anyone, we're going to learn these words and you have to learn how to pronounce them in a certain way that can be intimidating for people. She's just saying, you know, listen to my words and sing after me. And that's a way of learning. And that, I think especially educators that I've talked to really appreciate that idea of letting people in, but especially letting children in.
It's not, her approach is not strictly a didactic approach, which is something that I think children really come to appreciate. And it was the same is true, you see it in the call and response tradition and with Cab Calloway. And I just kind of buried in there, Ella says something about, well, we learn from one another. And I think that is so much at the core of her approach and what she does and what she has done and all the material she's recorded. We learn from one another by doing it together. It's communication, it's community.
And the other thing, and it seems, it's almost like it doesn't stick out, but if you think about kind of the history of children's music recording, and you have that clip of the kids coming into the studio to work with her, you know, she didn't insist on virtuosity. Virtuosity wasn't the end. Right. And the end of music education wasn't to find the kids who had so you know, talent and then to develop that talent. And so the children are making beautiful music, but she's not concerned about whether it's, you know, kind of technical perfection, whether they end the phrase at exactly the same time, those kinds of things that like kids learn in choir, and there's a certain value to those disciplines as well. I don't think she would trash those disciplines, but the idea that you could participate and that there was a way that she respected the different ways that children musicked together, and that you even in the recordings of children, she wasn't aiming for a sound of uniformity. You could hear children's differences in the fact that they were not always exactly together, but that was kind of recognizing the differences within the collective.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's a moment, watching this again just now, you can hear when Ella comes into the room, you can hear one kid like really sticking out up there. And what does Ella say? She says, all of you sounded very good. You all sounded very good. it's that encouragement. It's that immediate sense of place that she gives everybody that is so unbreakable. It's just so strong and so fundamental to sharing this material.
Well said. So do you want to tell us about clip 4?
Yeah, clip 4, nobody has ever seen before. I should also note, because I've scribbled down, the prior clips, not the You'll Sing a Song montage, but the other clips were cut together by my brilliant editor, Carol Martori, who's been working with me on this for several years. So I want to tip my hat to Carol and make sure that everybody knows that. This next clip is from Ella's archive. I just got this back. It was salvaged from near destruction. I got this back a couple of weeks ago, and it's color really.
A world premiere. A world premiere right now.
Oh yeah, it's a world premiere. It's a segment of a workshop that Ella did with a group of kids at Indiana State University in Terre Haute in July of 1975. And I think there are a lot of elements here. It's Ella really workshopping one song with a group of kids. It will seem very familiar to anybody who has been to an Ella performance or sung with her over the years. But there's so many elements in here that are hallmarks of the way Ella communicates with children, and they communicate with her with music, including repetition, and there's movement, and there's easy to recall song parts, turn taking. You have children leading the song at various times. There's call and response, which is a hallmark of Ella's method, and just that general enthusiasm. And then Ella, again, working as a facilitator, as a song leader, as somebody who is there to get the whole group in sync making music. So this is kind of fun, exciting for me to share this clip of Ella at Indiana State University in 1975.
The interface between culture and personality development was very important to us as a guiding principle. And it's one we've got as a part of the Erickson mission ever since. And in a way, Ella Jenkins kind of epitomized it because she was able to interact with children of all colors and communities. But at the same time, she was able to infuse what she did with the cultural background of the places that she had visited and the people she had known. And that combination of both understanding the generalities between children and understanding the uniqueness of every community's children was, I think, what endeared Ella to us.
One of Fred Rogers' favorite quotes was a Quaker saying that attitudes are caught, not taught. Caught, not taught. And what you could feel with Ella is her joy of, not only her joy of music, but her joy of sharing it with you became contagious. You loved being invited into that. And she found a way to help the children know the story of the song, feel the song, and then she would start in on it so that you felt like you had a real package there.
Well, that's good. I'm feeling fine. I hope you are feeling fine because I want us to do some singing and play some games and create a few rhythms today. Now, I have an instrument called the ukulele. Can you all pronounce that? Ukulele. A little louder, let's see. Ukulele. That's hard. And it looks something like what other instrument? What does it look like?
Guitar.
Yeah, it sure does. It looks like a guitar. Well, let's, I think I saw some of you girls and boys the other day, met somebody the other day, and we sang a song called Hello. Let me sing it through. Let me sing it first, and the next time I would like for all of us to sing it together. Let me sing it first. This is just the listening part. Hello, 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 and
too. It's hello, 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 and how are you? I'm fine, and I hope that you are too. Let's try to sing it together this time. Hello, 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 and how are you? I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, and I hope that you are too. Now if you know it a little better, sing a wee bit louder. Hello, 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 and how are you? I'm fine, and I hope that you are too. Now this time, you know, sometimes we can remember a tune or a melody by humming it. Let's hum. Let's hear you hum, Philip. Let's see if we can la la a little louder. La la la, la la la, la la la, la la la, la 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 la, la la la, la la la, la la la. All right, Jamie, let's hear you Lulu. Sing with me. Lulu. All of us together. This time I want you to keep some rhythm, clap your hands, and let's sing hello. Hello, 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 and how are you? I'm fine, and I hope that you are too. Now this time I want you to be especially friendly with your neighbors on both sides. So shake hands with someone on both sides of you. All right, and and we can sing together, all right? Hello, 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 and how are you? I'm fine, and I hope that you are too. Now for the last time, do you think you can sing it with mine just playing it? And you sing it, you know it by heart now? All right, let's try it. It's your turn. Let's hear you. Hello, and? How are you? That's good. I'm fine. And I hope you are too. That was very, very good.
So there you go, a little never before seen footage. And I forgot to mention that Barbara Bowman and Hedda Sherapan, who was a producer and educational curriculum writer for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, were seen at the very beginning of that, talking a little bit about Ella's methodology.
I think one of the things you mentioned at the outset that Ella Jenkins has been very intentional about documenting her work and controlling her work. I think this is a place maybe to tell people that she also, this footage it looks like was made by someone at Indiana University, right. But Ella also made it a point to document her performances, to document her recording sessions. There was always a photographer, at least sometimes a videographer. And I think that this kind of commitment to like kind of producing herself and carving out her own space. Early, we've talked about this, early in Ella's career, she had opportunities to work for, you know, a major recording label, or to kind of even go into entertainment as an adult entertainer. And by deciding that she was going to make music with the Folkways label, which, you know, had gave artists a particular license, creative license. But so she did that, but she also was a huge pioneer in terms of carving out a space for children's music as a kind of sphere, you know, within the educational world.
Absolutely. And I mean, Ella really is, you can draw all points of what we call kindy music or children's and family music now today. They really all go back to Ella. Very there are so few examples that don't. And another interesting thing, the song that she's singing there, now that's one that she wrote called Hello. I think it came out in 1964. But it's another song that has just kind of entered the traditional canon. There are several songs. The line is so blurred with Ella's catalog because she sung them with children, because people remember them from their childhood when they have children. They may not know where these songs came from. There's so many classics that are children's music classics that Ella has written. There are other traditional songs that she has adapted and made popular once again, like Mary Mac or Did You Feed My Cow, which are more traditional chants that many people know because Ella recorded them, because nobody else was putting out children's music.
And in the case of Mary Mac, it's so interesting, and she did many, many versions of Miss Mary Mac in her career, different versions. But that was a kind of window into Black girls' own vernacular culture, girls teaching girls, children teaching children in another kind of horizontal way, not being taught in a classroom or necessarily by parents. And it's amazing to me that the power of children's culture, that I think she understood that, I can meet someone now in my 50s and say, do you know Miss Mary Mac? Oh, how did you do it? And that's not just because of hearing Ella's version, that's because of the power of children's culture and the ways that children perpetuate their own musical culture.
And I think in so many ways, Ella has understood that, and that's been her model throughout her career, is that same model of children's culture. Let's swap this around, let's play with it. There's a perpetual playfulness in what Ella does and how she does it.
And at the same time, in that playfulness, there's a kind of great seriousness, because in so many pieces of her repertoire, she understood also music as a repository of consciousness. And by choosing particular songs, on her very first album, she had a chain gang song, which you would not think, comes out of the vernacular repertoire of songs that imprisoned people made up to help them survive the chain gang. And you wouldn't think of this as like kind of maybe good fare for a children's record to talk about prisoners and even violence. But I think she understood, music as a container for collective consciousness, and that even though you were presenting this material to children in a way that was not meant to be scary or upsetting to them, you were teaching them something about American history that was also very important.
I think it's a great point. Yeah.
So I think we have time for one more clip.
Yeah. Let me say, before we do the last clip, two things. This film, I know there's several questions, we'll get to the Q&A, but the film is in post-production. I know a lot of people are wondering. So it's not finished, we're in post-production. We're working on funding and partnerships to get it across the finish line. And we'll share some information later about how you can help support it. But I also have, before we show the last film clip and go to Q&A, I have a little message from Ella. I talked to her yesterday, and she was thrilled that Gail and I were going to be here to talk to everybody, and she says hello, and we're so happy NAEYC was going to present this conference. And I said, well, is there anything that you want me to share with the educators who will be listening and watching? And she said, yeah. She said, I've reached a very senior age, but the love for the children put me there. Their smiles, their laughter put me there. Their arms around me. I see them and we see each other. You can take them everywhere. There we go. All right, Katie, let's have clip number 5.
We are here today to celebrate a national treasure, Ella Jenkins.
I'm not wrapped up.
Over her career, Ella has performed her songs on all 7 continents, including Antarctica. Ella has written songs, chants, and poems in Spanish, Chinese, Hebrew, Korean, Swahili, and other languages. Anybody speak Swahili? How about Spanish? Show of hands. Okay, good.
And Southside,
English.
And Southside?
Southside English, yeah. Okay,
Southside English. Let me add that to the list of languages. This banner shows all the 40 albums she's recorded since 1957. 60 years of recording, so.
Wow. Does anyone have a song that they can lead just on the spur of the moment? Anybody? You've gone to camp, you mean you don't know any of the songs they talk about?
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I've done interviews with Ella. We've talked many times, and one of the questions that always comes up is, so what's your secret? Why are you so good at what you do?
Having met a lot of different artists over the years, there are certain artists that you look at them and you think they're not working really hard to make themselves better. They're working really hard to make us better.
She genuinely loves people. No matter how famous she became, there's something about her. She's always at the same level. I think it's partly because she never had kids herself. But she has become a mother-like figure for many kids.
If you can touch the soul of people, you bring people out, you make them see themselves, you are great, you have something to give, you are important, you know. You can change the world. And Ella Jenkins is a natural. She comes into a place and she transforms the place, transforms the children, transforms the teachers, and they are never going to be the same. And that is revolutionary.
That's good.
Tim, it's hard to follow that one.
Yeah.
To follow that one up. I see people chatting about how they're, how that seeing that footage makes them feel. I think, SUNY, there's so many profound things that you captured. SUNY Paz in that clip talking about the magic of making people be able to see themselves is so interesting, so profound. So important when thinking about children.
And I think what Ella exemplifies too, here is that she's not just an instructor. She's not strictly a teacher or performer. She's a member of our greater community. And you are a member of her community. So that the music is a way that we can all communicate together. I know, Gail, you and I, we've talked about how it creates an immediate democracy. And I think Ella just exemplifies that ethos so strongly in all that she does and shares, and her insatiable appetite for sharing and for music and for caring.
I feel like we should just maybe turn to Q&A and then
let's do it
now, and we can also, and I'll toss some questions in, and then you and I can talk forever about this, which We've done. We can
We
go on
do.
forever. I think there are a lot of questions. Tim, can you tell us about? There's questions about the release of the film, but do you want to tell us a little bit about the history of it, and then also let us know where the film is now?
Sure. So the project started. I grew up. I'm in the Chicago area. I grew up here, and my elementary school music teacher, as many do, a gentleman named Fred Cook, used Ella's music in the classroom and recorded an album of her songs when I was a student, and then eventually introduced me to Ella as a child. And I ran into Fred a handful of years ago, and he said, people have talked about doing a doc about Ella, but nobody's ever really gotten it together. And the seed kind of was planted in my brain, and I couldn't shake it. And then I ran into Ella a couple of times within a couple of weeks. And I thought, okay, this is the universe saying, get your act together. So I started in earnest working with Ella about six years ago, maybe give or take a little more, and recorded 40 or so interviews, more than a dozen events, and a series of interviews with Ella, and now a massed archive and all sorts of material. Now the film is in post-production. As I said before, we're working on fundraising and partnerships to try to take it across the finish line.
Tim, for people who don't know about films, what does post-production mean?
Post-production, well, that could mean anything, really. It means we've finished shooting everything, and we're in the stages of fundraising and finding partnerships to help finish it, to get it finished.
Because you need it edited, you need sound, right. all those credits that roll
the things.
Films.
That's it. All those people.
We have a question here about what's the most popular, and Anonymous is asking the most popular Ella Jenkins song that's used to this day with groups of children. I don't know that we know the answer to that. I think we've dropped into the chat a link to a little survey that actually, I think Tim and I are curious about this in our research about Ella, to kind of try to figure out what educators today are using of Ella Jenkins' work, and to kind of try to figure out over time if that material is changing. I have behind me Multicultural Children's Music, which was released in 1995. This was a compilation of music that was put together by Smithsonian Folkways. You saw Tony Seeger in some of your clips, Tim, and Tony Seeger had the idea of in the mid 90s of pulling together, having Ella actually select works and putting them together under, it was then emerging as a kind of important notion in education of multiculturalism. And I think also to give teachers who are now being told, kind of the imperative of multiculturalism in their curricula, to give them a tool and a kind of way of thinking about what that might sound like in a music classroom. So this album in 1995 was put together, and as far as I think you and I know from the folks at Smithsonian, together with the You'll Sing a Song album, this has been, Multicultural Children's Music has been a huge bestseller. And then it was so popular that they put out another compilation, Multicultural Children's Music. And if you do get your hands on again, if you can go to Folkways or get your hands on the actual physical copies of these things, Ella's liner notes and her reflections about these songs are really worth thinking about, especially, given that she gets to comment in the mid 90s about work going back to the 1950s and what it means to bring it together under that rubric of multiculturalism, which meant something slightly different in the 1960s and kind of didn't have a name, as someone in the film says, when she was doing it. We have another question about, Tim, there's a question about, will the film be on streaming services or in cinemas? Maybe everywhere.
But yes, we hope so. We certainly hope so. Both.
Tim, question for you. Did Ella Jenkins and Fred Rogers work together frequently?
They worked together. Ella was a guest on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood for the first time in 1974. I've been saying 1975, but actually it was 1974. I looked this up again the other day. She was on the series 8 times as a guest up into the 1990s. So she was one of the more frequent repeat visitors to the neighborhood, extended neighbor, I guess. And many of the folks from Fred Rogers Productions have very wonderful and warm memories of working with Ella on the show. And then again at conferences and other events. Now, I don't know that Ella and Fred Rogers worked together. I know that they were at some events together, but I don't know that they did any workshops together or anything like that beyond appearing on the program. But they were friendly.
There's another question about Ella's background in childhood education or development.
Yeah, well, Ella, she majored in college in
sociology.
Thank you, in sociology and then physical education.
At minors in children's psychology and physical education.
Right, and physical education. And at that time, she got a job. She had worked with kids starting in the 40s. She lists in some of the early liner notes, Ella says, well, she started working with children in 1949, which, if you're counting, was a while ago. And that was primarily at camps around the Chicago area. But then in the, I don't know exactly when she got the job, but when she began her schoolwork in Chicago, she followed some friends to San Francisco, attended San Francisco State, and that's where she finished her undergraduate work. And she got a job at the Albany Rec Department. Ella, this is a whole other seminar, but she was a table tennis champion. And somebody at the Albany Rec Center saw her teaching table tennis to kids, offered her a job. And she parlayed that into work with the YWCA when she returned to Chicago and started working with children there. So her experience, it was experiential education, really, more than formal education and working with children.
And I think it's so important, even if you tell the story about like Ella, she was the city women's champion in table tennis, and then kind of being, kind of asked to work at the YWCA because of the table tennis. What's also extraordinary is how pioneering Ella was, given the limited opportunities available even to Black women who were college educated like she was in the 1940s and 1950s. I mean, it's an extraordinary career, and to have chosen the path that she did, where she could maintain a certain control and didn't have to feel limited by the way that someone wanted to present her. At this moment when where she has to make a decision about whether to perform for adults or for children. And, I think Ella would herself talk about how she had a kind of autonomy in thinking about her career with children that would be nurturing to her in a way that maybe the entertainment sphere was certainly, it's not known for being nurturing. And she was good friends with the folk singer Odetta. She knew the challenges of that life, and Odetta had made quite a career. And most people didn't have that career, but I think she was well aware of, what were the possibilities available to her and how could she make the most of these things. It's kind of, she is an incredible, incredible life story in addition to the music.
Right.
In addition.
Exactly. As she said yesterday, when she said, I've reached a very senior age and it's the children who put me there. I think that's exactly it. She followed what she had to follow. And,
yeah.
we're grateful.
I guess we only have time for maybe one more question. I'm looking here. There's a question about where Ella got her inspiration to do music, or why she used ukulele. I think ukulele, maybe Tim, you can answer this. I mean, first of all, ukulele, ukulele is it's an accessible instrument, 4 strings. Easy to carry around, inexpensive to acquire, and something you could carry up in front of. I mean, I think it was not the most popular. It was considered a little bit of a nerdy, even in the folk revivalists, they played the banjo or the acoustic guitar. It was like a little weird to play ukulele, and then a baritone ukulele, which is like a weird ukulele, although bigger.
Yeah, and she took flack for that for playing ukulele. A friend, the story goes, a friend named Shiz Hori, who was, I can't remember what he did. He's on one or two of Ella's early albums. But in the 60s, she was trying to play guitar and lead songs, and it wasn't really working out for her. And he said, well, why don't you try the baritone ukulele? Oh, okay. But it was something that she could not only hold, but still work beyond it. It wasn't about strumming the guitar. It wasn't about, making the changes. It wasn't being a troubadour with that instrument. It was something that helped her lead the song, and it worked for her. She could travel with it. That was really something that was very important. She went through many ukuleles, traveling as her career went on. And she likes to laugh now that she really took a lot of flack for playing the ukulele, but now they're everywhere. You hear them on TV and commercials. Every band seems to have a ukulele.
If you're like me during the pandemic, you can take up ukulele through virtual lessons just for fun. I highly recommend it. I think we are just about out of time. Tim, do you want to tell us a little bit more about how people? Oh, well, I guess I'll talk first. I'm working on a book that's centered on Ella and her contributions broadly, and I'm, trying to write her into music history and, kind of Americans history more broadly. And I would love to hear your stories, your testimony, and you can find me at George Washington University, and that's my email address. So please feel free to be in touch, and I'll write back to you.
And you can find more about the documentary at www.singasongtogether.com, and on social media outlets. We're on Instagram, Ella Jenkins Film, which I've been having a lot of fun posting things from Ella's archive on. Ella Jenkins Film on Facebook and on Twitter. And you can drop me a line at singasongtogether.com if you have questions or information. And if you want to make a donation through Company of Folk, which is our nonprofit sponsor for the film, we would love that. Would love to have your support for the film. I have a whole bunch of, you can see what a questionable webmaster I am when you go to singasongtogether.com. You can see a list of thank you gifts that we have, including a bunch of CDs and LPs from Ella's overstock stash that she's been kind enough to share with us. And anybody who donates now, I'm throwing in an EP, a hard to find Ella Jenkins EP from 1979. This is your year, children. So any NAEYC conference donors, I will send this your way.
And then I guess if people know that if they work with organizations that do matching things, or they can get in touch with you about that.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely, they can.
Yeah, that post-production is expensive, I guess.
It is. Sometimes it takes a while.
Sometimes it takes a while.
But we're getting there. And
yeah.
It's just been an honor to work with Ella and to get to know her and help share this story.
I think everyone's really looking forward to the film. The chat is filled with enthusiasm about it. So we'll all look forward to having it out.
I'm looking forward to it too. And Gail, I want to thank you for being here today, and I want to thank Rianne Alvin for passing us along, having us here, Michelle Kang, Nicole, and Monique at NAEYC, and then our friends at High Scope, Katie and Ingrid, and Alejandra. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I know you've been probably looking at screens a lot this week, and I appreciate you taking some time to wrap up your weekend with us.
Thank you. It's been fun.
And we'll see you online.
Bye.